Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome to the Ask Abhijit Show, episode 273. I hope everyone's doing great. Let us see who all is there in the live chat. So, this is going to be a super chat and live chat episode. I'm going to take questions live from all of you, and you can start asking. But let me see who all is there on the live chat. I can see Meet, Aryan Patel, Sagar Thorat, Manisha Cardoso, Suhas Reddy, Rashmi Rathod from Rajasthan, Bageshwar Army, Samana Satish, Ram Shukla, Shri Ramchandraya Namaha, Hitanshu Mehta, Sandeep Raj Krishnagiri, Savaria Seth from Bihar, from planet Bihar. Sumit, again, Geopolitical Dubai from Indore, Pranay Paul from Kolkata. Who else do we have? Shreyas Mitra from Moscow, Jay Guman, bonsoir. Dheeraj Kamath says, good morning. Well, good morning to you, sir. Nishant Tiwari, Latangi Suresh, Alvin Rodriguez, Animesh Paul, Ayush, Somi Jain from Jaipur, Anup Tekade, Namaste, Shri Vatsa, Meet. Who else do we have? We have Suhas, we have Ashwari Nagarkar, we have Pro Gamer and lots of other people. So, hello everybody, and great to see you all. Now, let's get going with some questions. More people are chiming in. Alan J. Victor, Uncle Bagpacker from Pune, Latangi Suresh from Tamil Nadu. Good morning. Well, good morning, and everybody else. Okay, let's get going with some questions. We have one super chat right now, so let's take that. Rohan Suneja says, should India take over the Astola Island, given its strategic location near Pakistan's coast? If the UK can hold the Falkland Islands from 12,000 kilometers away, why can't we? So, to answer that question, first of all, let's take a look at where this island is located. Let's go to the map. I'm going to put the map on the screen, and we're going to go and find this island, Astola Island. So, Astola Island is off the coast of Pakistan. Somewhere over here. Now, where will it be? Let's find it. It won't be very far away from Gwadar. So I suppose this should be Astola. Here we have it. So first of all, let me click here. This is Astola Island, and let's zoom out so that we understand where we are talking, what location we are talking about. It's not very far from the coast of India. If we do a straight line from Kutch to Astola, it's about 470 something kilometers away. Now, this island belongs to Pakistan. This is officially Pakistani territory. This is not disputed territory, unless you consider the whole of Pakistan to be disputed territory. So it's Pakistani territory. Now, according to international law, you can't just walk in and take over someone's territory, right? You can't do that unless there is a just cause for that. And right now, we don't have a just cause for that. And if we start going and doing such things, it will give other nations the justification for trying to do something similar to us. If the world starts behaving in that manner, that whoever is stronger just goes and grabs whatever they want, then the entire international system collapses. Now, you are comparing this with the Falkland Islands. Let's consider that as well. So, the Falkland Islands, or the Malvinas, are located off the coast of Argentina. Okay, these are the islands, and they obviously are significantly far away from the UK. Just a rough measurement, if we do a straight line measurement, it's gonna be about, there we have it, 12,000 something kilometers. But the fact is that these islands have been held by the UK for a very long time. They are off the coast of Argentina, which is why the Argentine government, the nation of Argentina, claims these islands as its own. And there's history behind that. We'll not go into that. But that's a different case. When it comes to Astola Island, we have, see, whoever was in charge of making decisions in the late 1940s, 45, 46, 47, they decided that India will be partitioned and Indian territory will be given over to create a new country, artificial temporary nation called Pakistan. And Astola was part of that. So you can't just walk in there and take it. I'm sure we can do it. We are powerful enough to go and take the island and retain it if we want to. The Pakistanis will put up some resistance, but I'm sure we can do this. But the point is that it is illegal according to international law to just walk into someone's territory and grab it, right? We can, but it's going to cause all kinds of problems for us. The more powerful nations like the US and China will then sanction India and declare India as, categorize India in the same category as Russia for the alleged Russian invasion of Ukraine, which obviously has happened, right? So we can do it, but it is not advisable to do that until and unless we become so powerful that nobody can stop us. And obviously, Pakistan was created artificially without considering the sentiments of the Indian people, without having a referendum as to whether the Indian people are willing to give up Indian territory to create this artificial nation. That's a whole different story. But what's happened has happened, and today Pakistan is a legally recognized nation. And according to international law, we just can't do that, right? So I'm sure it's strategically great and all that, but it's not something we can do as of now. Okay, let's take another question. This is by Rashik Uddin. Rashik Uddin says, why are there so many plane crashes this year? So let's take a look at plane crash statistics, shall we? Let's remove this. Okay. The question is, why are there so many plane crashes this year? Are there more plane crashes this year compared to other years? Let's find out. Let's go and do a simple Google search. Number of plane crashes per year. Number of plane crashes per year. Let's see. Number of plane crashes. Where shall we go? I think we can take a look at Wikipedia, even though it's not necessarily reliable, but let's take a look. Plane crashes per year, history. What do we have? September, blah, 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 blah. Aviation. Okay, this doesn't seem to have a year by year thing, so let's not go there. Let's move out. Do we have yearly statistics somewhere? What does this AI overview say? Fatal accidents, blah blah blah. Rate. Not sure. Do we have some figures? What is this? People killed. No, we just want to know the number of air crash accidents, not number of deaths. Not sure. Where do we find something? Okay, I'll have to look into this. This is per year. Do we have this? How many commercial plane crashes per year? Fatal accidents. Okay, from 2020 to 2025, 2025. Let's see. Okay, let us see. What is Spanish law? I don't know what it is, but let's take a look. Do you have a year by year breakdown? Once again, it's not giving. Okay, maybe it does. Aviation crashes. So look, it looks like the number of crashes per year is going down, but it doesn't seem to have the latest 2025 statistics. Let me see over here. It's only up to 2019 here. Okay, fine. We'll have to go somewhere else, I suppose. And somebody is asking the same question. How many plane crashes this year? Let us see, 2 small planes, blah, blah, etc. Okay, once again, it's okay. Look, I'm not going to do this because it's going to take half an hour perhaps. The point is that just because there is a lot of media coverage of aircraft crashes, doesn't necessarily mean that there are more plane crashes than previous years this year. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that at all. So I don't know. I'll have to go and look into the statistics to figure out how many plane crashes have occurred per year in the past 10 years or so. And then if we can find that, then perhaps we can. Do we have Perplexity? Let me see Perplexity. Maybe Perplexity can find us. Okay, let's go to Perplexity and check that out. Okay, let's do this. Please list the number of plane crashes that occurred per year between 2015 and 2025. Let's see what Perplexity can find us. What can it find? Blah blah blah, etc. Okay, let's see. I don't want fatalities, but it's still giving me fatalities. So 2015, 123, 2021, 113, 2022, 100. Wow. Okay, 2025 we have 122. Well, that's interesting. That's rather concerning. The average, I think, even we just barely halfway through 2025, and we're already above the average per year of the past 10 years. Well, looks like what you are saying may be true. So it looks like there actually are more plane crashes this year than in previous years. Well, that's interesting and that's concerning. Why is it so? Is it because safety standards have dropped in some in some aircraft manufacturing companies? Maybe, I don't know. I think we'll be able to figure out what the reason is only in hindsight, only once the year is over and we can analyze what's happening. One point of concern is very clear, that the Boeing aircraft company. Now, I could ask Perplexity to tell us how, how many of these were Boeing aircraft and how many were not. We could do that also, but I'll not do it right now. Um, but it's possible. I mean, shall we do that? Shall we do that? Let's do that. Let's ask a follow-up question. Uh, how many of the plane crashes in 2025 involved Boeing aircraft? Let's see. We have 122 crashes this year. Not explicitly summarized. It's trying to hide. Okay. Well, I'm sure it has the statistics. I suppose it's. I think we'll have to interrogate it further and use some specific prompting techniques, perhaps, to get to the bottom of this. There is an ongoing concern about Boeing. Okay, Boeing has in the past few years seemingly lowered its safety standards, and they have tried to hide things from the public. They had these couple of plane crashes that happened, one in Indonesia and one in Ethiopia, that were because of the faulty MCAS system, I believe, which was a software patch that would force the aircraft nose to keep going down if one of the uh, angle of attack sensors was faulty. And you usually have two angle of attack sensors on both sides of the fuselage, but the MCAS system was connected only to one of these sensors. So a single point of failure, which is incredible. And that's what caused the two crashes. And after the first crash happened, Boeing was aware that this is the faulty MCAS system that caused the crash, and yet they suppressed this, they hid this from the public, and they allowed a second crash to happen. So there are concerns about Boeing, no question about it. And Perplexity, I think I'll have to interrogate it using third or fourth degree or something to get the answer. But yeah, looks like Perplexity is not very forthcoming with the answer. So yeah, there are issues with Boeing for sure. But I'm not sure if it's the entirety, if that is the only reason why there have been more plane crashes this year. We'll have to look into it. Right now, I don't have an answer. But one thing is very clear: Boeing is there are problems with Boeing, and all of that goes back to the merger that Boeing had with the McDonnell Douglas company, which happened, I think, I don't know, quite a while ago. But that's when the company's culture changed. It was the McDonnell Douglas bosses who eventually took over operations in Boeing, and they changed the culture of the company. That they moved the headquarters from one city, the long-standing city, to another city, and everything changed in Boeing. And they started doing cost cutting, and it became a marketing driven company rather than an engineering driven company. And yeah, that seems to be the reason why there have been so many issues. But we'll have to see. Yeah. Swastik Mahesh, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Aries Manticore says, given the recent sanctions imposed on India by the European Union and China's seemingly good behavior, how important is aggressive leverage in negotiations? Well, if you have ever negotiated for anything, leverage is all that matters in negotiations. whether it's aggressive or non-aggressive leverage. Leverage is leverage. Leverage doesn't have a type. Leverage is leverage. The more leverage is a scalar quantity. It's not a vector quantity. Leverage has magnitude. It doesn't have direction. So the larger your leverage and the more different kinds of leverage you have, the better off you are in negotiations, right? So leverage is all that matters in negotiations. If you have no leverage, then you're going to come off second best in the negotiations. And obviously you need to know how to negotiate. Yeah. So leverage is very important. Yeah. So recently the EU has sanctioned an Indian refinery because we are importing Russian crude oil and then refining it and then selling it to the EU nations, and the EU has imposed sanctions on that Indian refinery. And let's see how the government of India responds to that. But yeah, so this is an ongoing issue for us. They're essentially trying to clamp down on India's sovereignty, on what we can do and what we cannot do as a sovereign nation. They will decide. So that's an issue. Okay, Pranit says, listen, this is not a geopolitical question, sir. I have said it very clearly. I'm going to take only geopolitical questions today. I don't look into national politics. I'm very sorry, but I will not be taking this question. I have put a pinned comment that I'm going to take geopolitical questions only. So why are you doing this? I don't understand. I'm sorry. I don't discuss national politics, internal politics. I just don't do it. So there we have it. Shivam says, what's the update in Burma? I have no idea. The update of what kind? Geopolitical update? It's an ongoing situation. It's an ongoing situation. The nation is in a state of civil war. About half of the nation is under the control of the government of Burma, the military government, and about half of the nation is in the control of various ethnic groups and the militias they have formed. And all of these militias, obviously, they are supported by foreign nations. Generally, there are two nations that are supporting various militias. One is the nation of China, and one is the United States. So it's a proxy war that you're seeing in Burma. And generally, the militias that are supported by the United States are militias connected to ethnic groups that have been converted to Christianity over the past few decades or whatever. Whichever ethnic groups are Christian, they're fighting on behalf of the US. And whichever ethnic groups are non-Christian, they're fighting for China or they're fighting autonomously. But autonomously, if you're fighting, you will not get your endless supply of arms and ammunition, right? You need arms and ammunition. Even if you have AK-47s, you need bullets. After firing a few, you're going to get rid of the bullets. You're going to exhaust your bullets, right? So where do the bullets come from? They can only come if you have a foreign patron, because you're not manufacturing bullets at home, right? So that's the deal. So it's an ongoing situation, and it has spilled over into India and into Manipur mostly. And that is something the government of India needs to look into. I mean, do we want to absorb lakhs of foreigners who have no allegiance to our culture, civilization, or our country, and who are essentially proxies of the United States? Do we want that? Is that what we want to do? You want to give up half of the territory of Manipur to foreigners? I don't care how many decades they've been squatting in India. Pakistanis were recently discovered who have been in India since the 1950s and 1960s. Does it mean they're Indians now? So let's say these cookies have been here since 1890. So what? It doesn't make them Indian, right? They've been transplanted to create this artificial problem. They've been transplanted from various parts of Burma into Manipur to punish the kingdom of Manipur. That's what the British did. It was a punitive measure to bring in foreigners who would then create problems for the locals. Do we want these people in India, really? So that's something the government of India needs to look into. And we have to treat all foreigners, all foreign infiltrators and squatters in India the same way. No matter how many decades they have been sitting in India, it doesn't matter. Even if they have documents, Aadhaar cards and PAN cards and God knows what other cards they must have been given, we know what the deal is. It's very easy if you have local political connections to get these documents created, and they'll be actual real documents. So many Rohingyas in Bangladesh have these Aadhaar cards and I don't know, election cards, election ID cards and bank accounts and everything. It's usually easier for these foreigners to get documents compared to actual Indians. So yeah, all of this needs to be looked into. It's a complete absolute mess. It's a multi-dimensional mess. India's Far East has been horribly mismanaged by India since 1947 and since 1949. Stepmotherly treatment has been given. As a consequence of that, there have been so many insurgencies, which then foreign nations have taken advantage of. So this needs to be fixed. Obviously, it needs to be fixed. So there we are. MK says, are the weapons that we sell to other countries under the supervision and control of Indian technicians, especially uh, the Philippines, which is a US vassal? Well, I don't have information about this. Uh, the Philippines, as we know, has very strong ties with the US. We know that. You could be correct in saying the Philippines is a US vassal. No question about it. And now there's even stronger cooperation that's now beginning to happen between the Philippines and the US, which is something I discussed in the recent episode of Geostrategy that aired 48 or so hours ago. So Philippines obviously is a US vassal, and we have sold, if I'm not mistaken, BrahMos missiles to the Philippines. Now, if India sells the BrahMos missile system to any country X, country Y, country Z, whatever, it will only happen if Russia approves it, because this is a jointly co-developed, co-produced missile system. So both nations get a veto. If Russia wants to sell it to country X, then it has to take India's permission. If India wants to sell it to country X, we have to take Russia's permission. It can only happen if both countries agree. Now, I expect that the missile system that we sell to foreign countries will be what we call an export version. It will not be the full version that's used by the Indian armed forces. It will be a slightly watered down version. And I'm sure we will have taken sufficient care to ensure that no critical technology falls into the hands of, let's say, the master of the vassal. Right? But whether we have Indian technicians there or not, I think only the government of India will know about it. It's not something that will be disclosed to the rest of the world, including to Indian citizens. So I don't know about that. But I'm sure we have taken sufficient precautions to ensure that our critical technologies don't fall into the hands of nations that may not be very favorably inclined towards us. Sai Teja Reddy says, how could melting Arctic sea routes reconfigure Indo-Pacific maritime trade? The Arctic region. Let's go and take a look at the Arctic region on the map. Okay, so here we have the map of the world. Now you're talking about, first let's discuss the Indo-Pacific maritime trade. So the Indo-Pacific maritime trade, there's no trade happening in the Pacific. The nations that exist in the Pacific are very, very tiny nations. These are the South Pacific nations like Samoa, French Polynesia, the Cook Islands, the Pitcairn Islands, which is a micro nation, essentially. Very interesting history, of course, but I'll not go into that. Then we have Samoa, we have Fiji, we have Tonga. The capital of Tonga is Nuku'alofa. Where is Nuku'alofa? Here we have it, Nuku'alofa, the capital of Tonga. Yeah, GK question, and so on. So these are tiny nations. So the trade with those nations doesn't really matter. Then we have Hawaii, which is a US occupied region. But see, the trade that happens between various nations, it passes through various choke points, as we know. One is the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb, which is over here, right? The other one is the Suez Canal. That's another choke point. Then you have energy choke point, which is the Strait of Hormuz over here, the Strait of Hormuzd. Then we have the Strait of Malacca, which is another choke point, and so on. And there's some more which we can so most of the trade, it passes through these choke points: Malacca, Suez, Bab al Mandeb. The energy trade, it has a choke point, is as in the Strait of Hormuz. And because of the recent problems in the Gulf of Aden, that's why a lot of the trade has been routed across all the way down south through the Cape of Good Hope, and so on. So the trade routes, they essentially are between large nations like India and China and the Western nations like the EU nations and so on. and also the United States. So that trade could possibly go via the Pacific. Now, just because the Arctic uh, sea route could open up doesn't mean that we need to start using that and start bypassing this region, because most of the nations over here, the major nations, they are far from the Arctic, and and they don't really need. I mean, it doesn't really make sense to go all the way north and then transport goods via the Arctic region. It will be significantly more costly to do that. The reason why the Arctic region is important is because it will have significant reserves of oil and natural gas. Okay. Uh, and it is something that nations like China and the Northern European nations and also North American nations that could use that would be interested in that. And obviously, because of the reserves of oil and gas and other resources that will open up over here, that's why this region is it's coming under increasing focus. But in my opinion, it is not really, because if I've shown you how far it is from the major nations. It's not really an alternative uh, sea route which could replace the existing sea routes. It's something that's important because of the natural resources found in the region. It is not really a viable alternative to reroute the uh, trading lanes for. Okay. None the Tucker says, did Mossad help Adani from Hindenburg? Listen, when you talk about whether Mossad did this or Mossad did that, do you think I am the person to ask that? Do you think I work for Mossad or I have connections in Mossad? Do you really think so? Come on. Yeah. You better ask a Mossad agent. I assure you I'm not. I have no connections in Mossad. And if Mossad did something, you think they will let me know about it? Come on. Ask better questions, please. Aries Manticore says, many fearmonger sanctions on India on Russian oil, but is it not an opportunity? Let them eject us out of the global economy. It could force us to evolve towards self-reliance and fundamental changes. Sure, okay. It will leave India with no option but to be self-reliant and so on. But it will come at tremendous cost and tremendous pain, right? And not short-term cost and short-term pain, long-term. I mean, at least a couple of decades worth. And then our dear Indian citizens will start whining and moaning and crying that we now can no longer get the benefit of this or that, or we no longer get our so-called our luxury goods. We no longer get iPhones. We no longer get Android phones. We no longer get this. We can no longer watch our favorite Netflix, for example. We no longer have Amazon. I mean, all kinds of complaints will come in, and of course, we will lose out on a lot of trading opportunities, GDP growth opportunities, which could ensure that we don't reach the uh, $10 trillion target GDP by 2020, whatever time period, whatever target date we have, maybe 2030, right? Maybe we want to become a $10 trillion economy by 2030 or 2035. We'll miss that. So it's an opportunity of sorts. It's an opportunity only if you're an autarky, only if you have access to all the natural resources and everything that are needed, that are necessary for a nation to grow. If you don't have access to that, then it's a big problem. So, for example, we still depend on other nations for our energy, oil and gas. About 60+% of our energy, especially oil and gas, comes from abroad. More than that, I'm sure. Now, if we have sanctions and the sanctions force the Gulf nations to not trade with us, then what happens? So we have to be realistic that this is not merely an opportunity, it's a huge problem if this happens. If they eject us out of the global economy, we will no longer have access to oil and gas. Then what do? Go back to bullock carts? Go completely electric? Then what? Then how do we generate the electricity? By burning coal, but is coal enough? So we have to be practical, we have to be realistic, and we have to act in a manner that ensures that we don't really get sanctioned, right? Okay, MK says, why didn't the British Empire apply the Thucydides trap logic to preemptively contain or attack Germany before the world wars? Um, well, now that's a okay. So it depends on the leadership. It depends on a nation's leadership. If your nation's leadership isn't strong, if it is historically illiterate, if it doesn't realize, if it doesn't see the warning signs, then, well, even if you are a powerful nation, you will be caught napping, right? So I think that's what happened. Uh, of course, the UK did realize that Germany, before the Second World War, before the First World War, the UK did realize that Germany is becoming a major maritime power. It's developing a first-class navy, especially those U-boats, the undersea boats, and so on. And that's essentially, and they started taking steps uh, to militarize themselves and all. It's pretty complicated. The First World War especially is an extraordinarily complicated scenario. And what I can say in brief is that if your leadership isn't good enough, and if they don't see the warning signs, and if they see the warning signs and don't realize what the warning signs are telling you, then yeah, then you'll be caught napping. And that's kind of what happened. And even when Hitler started remilitarizing Germany, I mean, Germany was not supposed to militarize as per the agreement that they had, the Treaty of Versailles and so on. But Hitler started militarizing Germany, and he rescued the economy, which was in a terrible state. And you could see that Germany is militarizing. Germany is becoming more and more aggressive and assertive and dangerous. But what did Chamberlain do? He went and tried to negotiate and came back with a piece of paper. Here we have it. Germany has agreed to this or that. So it depends on the quality of your leadership. And if your leadership isn't good enough, then yeah, you're gonna mess up. Geopolitical Dubey says, does Russia want India to be a major arms exporter? I don't think Russia will mind that. As long as, I mean, see, from Russia's perspective, their biggest problem is the US, obviously, the entire Western bloc, which is led by the US. All the other Western nations are vassals of the US, the EU, NATO nations, and other whatever the nations we have. That's the biggest problem for Russia. What's the second biggest problem for Russia? It's China. China and Russia are natural adversaries. They are long-term adversaries. Right now, they are working together in what we call a modus vivendi, uh, because they have a bigger external threat. But if that external threat goes away, Russia and China will instantly transform into enemies. Just like in the Second World War, the US and the USSR were allies, weren't they? But the moment the war ended, they became enemies, adversaries. That's the thing. So, from Russia's perspective, if the US is taken out of the equation, then China is the biggest threat. And what can counterbalance China in Asia? It's India. So, if India gets stronger, if India becomes more powerful, if India becomes a proper major arms exporter, the Russians won't mind it, because India and Russia are not at loggerheads in anything. We have no points of disagreement. We have no significant major disputes of any kind. Right? And if India becomes a major arms exporter, Russia won't mind importing arms from us either. So Russia will be okay with it. They will not mind. All right. Tarun says, if all Middle Eastern countries were to unite like they did under the Abbasid Caliphate, would such a union be as powerful and dominant today as it was in Abbasid times? What would be the major geopolitical consequences? The Abbasid Caliphate. We have the Umayyad, we have the Rashidun, the Abbasid. Let's just quickly look at the time period of the Abbasid Caliphate. One second, let me see. Umayyad, Rashidun, Abbasid. Abbasid is just before the first invasions of India, right? Abbasid Caliphate. Yeah, there we have it. This one, and it was brought to an end by by Hulegu Khan's capture and destruction of Baghdad. Hulegu Khan was a descendant, probably grandson of Shri Chinggis Khan. So it replaced the Umayyad Caliphate in 750 CE, and it was the caliphate under which the first raids on India, on Sindh, happened. So, look, and if you look at this, yeah, it was a pretty big unified bloc. Do we have a better, larger map? Here we have it. So they controlled much of North Africa, the entirety of the Arabian Peninsula, most of the Arabian Peninsula. They had also conquered Persia, sadly, and they were infringing on the borders of India. They had already absorbed Sindh and so on. This was the Abbasid Caliphate at its greatest extent, more or less. So, the question we have to ask ourselves, my friends, is what made the Abbasid Caliphate so powerful? How was it able to expand so much and conquer so much territory? Just because you had all these regions unified under it, was that why it was powerful, or were these regions unified under it because it was so powerful? So why did the Arabs become this dominant force? First of all, it was Islam that unified them, and it gave them this militaristic ideology that everything needs to be conquered, everything needs to be destroyed, right? The world is there, it exists for you to conquer it, and your purpose is to convert the entire world to Islam, that sort of thing. So that gave them this militaristic zeal, and they were desert people. They were used to hardship, and they were used to a regimented, disciplined, militaristic life. And when that is combined with this religious zeal and good tactics and so strategies, then you can do wonders militarily. So that's how they were able to do that. And at the time, Persia was kind of weak, and the North African region was also not unified under any single empire or whatever. And Egypt was also weak, and that's why they were able to conquer so much of the world, and they were able to make raids into India as well, Sindh, the western parts of India. So they were successful because, and of course, they had good technologies and all that as well. Technologically, they were pretty good for that time. Probably some of the best technology of the time, they were employing those. So that's why they became so powerful, and that's why they were able to conquer so much of the world. Now, today, if the Middle Eastern countries were to unite somehow, okay, just like under the Abbasid Caliphate, would that union be as so? At that time, the Abbasid Caliphate was probably the most powerful geopolitical entity in the world, possibly, right? Now, if these Middle Eastern countries were to come together, unite under a single, let's say, emperor, caliph, again, today, will they suddenly become the most dominant geopolitical force in the world? They won't. They won't. China will still be more powerful than them. Russia will be more powerful than them. None of the Middle Eastern countries, Islamic countries, possesses the nuclear bomb, right? And Pakistan won't become part of this because the Americans won't allow that to happen. So you have a big block of nations that have combined together to create a new caliphate, but they don't have the military might. They don't have the best technology. Some of them may have F-16s or whatnot, but the Americans can kill those with the kill switch. And then the F-16s become museum pieces. They won't take off. Or even if they take off, they won't lock onto targets. The Americans don't want them to lock onto. So militarily, they're toothless. They have some manpower, but in today's world, the manpower doesn't matter. It's technology that matters. And they don't have the nuclear bomb. So what do? Even with a large portion of the world unified under a caliphate, it will not be a powerful force. There will be no major geopolitical consequences. Yeah, they could kind of control much of the world's oil and so on. So that could give them some leverage as a bargaining chip, but not to that extent, because the US is completely self-sufficient when it comes to oil and gas. So is Russia. It would give them some leverage over India and China. So that would be it would be more of energy sort of leverage and a little bit of geo-economic leverage, but not really any military leverage. And that too, not over the US, but over India and China and maybe some EU nations. So overall, it will not make much of a difference. It will be nowhere as powerful as the Abbasid Caliphate was. But an interesting thought experiment for sure. Aries Manticore says, could a dollar-backed cryptocurrency create a dark economy? A dollar-backed cryptocurrency, could it create a dark economy? It's a parallel economy. It's not a dark economy. So we have cryptocurrencies that exist in the world today. We have Bitcoin, we have Ethereum, we have all kinds of various other currencies, various kinds. And you can use those currencies to trade with people who accept those currencies, and by doing that, you can bypass the US dollar-based financial system. You can bypass it for sure. So that's a parallel economy, essentially. It's not a dark economy. And it's pretty secure, actually, if you know what you're doing. But if you have a dollar-backed cryptocurrency, then it becomes nothing but an extension of the US dollar's hegemony, right? Because see, right now the US dollar it could become worthless if all it takes is for the nations to stop trading in the US dollar. And then the US dollar becomes worthless because it is not backed up by anything tangible. It's not backed up by gold like it used to be until the early 70s. Until the early 70s, the US had committed that it will keep gold reserves equal to the amount of dollar bills in circulation. So if $1 bill was equivalent to X amount of gold, X grams of gold, then, and if you have X so much dollars in circulation, then the US was required by law to maintain that much gold, physical gold, in their coffers. But after Nixon came to power, he ended that, and the US dollar became a free floating currency, not backed up by anything. It was backed up by petroleum for a while. It was called the petrodollar. Today it's backed up by nothing. It's backed up by the US military might and nothing else. So if the Americans create a dollar-backed cryptocurrency, then once again that cryptocurrency is backed up by the US military might. And all it takes is for people to just ignore it and not trade in it to make it worthless. So it won't create a dark economy. It may at best create a parallel economy which will be tied to the actual economy. And that defeats the purpose of cryptocurrency. So yeah, it won't really make sense for people who want to trade in cryptocurrencies to use that dollar-backed cryptocurrency, because then you are defeating the purpose of creating cryptocurrencies in the first place. Dr. Ritabrata Debnath says, why is the US interested in entering the dairy business in India? Do they really think they can provide our population with milk daily? What's the foul play here? The US wants to enter every aspect of the Indian economy because they want to turn India into a giant market, first of all, a dumping ground for their products so that they can extract value out of India. And when it comes to dairy and agriculture, their products are genetically modified. Their cows have been genetically modified. Their crops have been genetically modified. These are laboratory experiments that they're playing. And you can see the consequences of that in the average health of the average person in the US. Everybody is unhealthy. All the meat they eat is messed up. All the dairy they drink is messed up. All their food products are toxic, filled with chemicals and God knows what. And these genetic experiments, they could end up creating all kinds of downstream effects, which would be extremely dangerous for people. So they want to get that into India. And that is something that the government of India is obviously resisting, because it makes sense to resist that. We don't want our population to fall prey to all this. So the reason they want to do this is they want to they want to essentially, well, there's no better way of saying it, they want to poison us. Yeah, the way they have poisoned their people. They want to bring that into India. And obviously, there could be some patented products that they will push into India. So, on the one hand, they extract money out of India by selling their substandard and poisoned stuff. And secondly, they get to poison the people of India and create long-term genetic problems in India. So one of the things the British did in India, okay, was by imposing 2.5 centuries of famine on the Indian population, they changed the food habits of Indians. The Indian diet became extremely heavily carbohydrate dependent. If you see the Indian diet today, it's all carbohydrates. There's hardly any protein. And because of this, Indians are extremely are way more susceptible to diabetes than other populations in the world because of the 2.5 centuries of starvation that the British imposed on India. So that kind of changed the genetics of India. Now the Americans want to do it in a different way by specifically targeting, certain genetics using genetically modified dairy products and agricultural products. So it's something that India should resist. We should not agree to import this garbage, and that seems to be the bone of contention right now when it comes to the trade talks with India and between India and the US. The trade talks have stalled, from what I hear. They're not progressing because the Americans are insisting that India should accept their agricultural exports, and we are saying we will not do that. So that's the deal. Okay, Shivam Bakshi says, interesting, UK, France are going down the hill with immigration. There's nothing they can do. But the US can kick illegals with a whim. Pardon my French. We haven't used any French. So, okay. So the US can kick illegals out anytime. Yeah, Trump wants to kick all the illegals out. That's what he has kept on saying. But how many have they actually deported? Trump came to power in January this year. How many illegal immigrants have the Americans kicked out thus far? There has been some action possibly on that, but I'm not sure they have deported like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands thus far. It is believed that during the Biden administration's 4 years in power, several million undocumented illegal immigrants were brought into the US by the Biden administration, mainly through the southern border with Mexico. How many of these have been deported? I'm not sure. A lot have been. But if Trump wants, I'm sure he can get everyone deported. But the UK and France aren't allowed to do that. The EU nations aren't allowed to do that. There's nothing they can do. So that's how it goes. See, this is what you could call demographic re-engineering of Europe. That is being done. And obviously, the root cause of all of that is the US. The US is the overlord of Europe. The major power in Western Europe is the US. It's not Germany, it's not France, it's not the UK, it is the US. It's the US. And whatever is being done to Europe is being done at the behest of the US. So, yeah, they are re-engineering the demographics of Europe, and there's nothing the European nations can do about this. And this is all being done via Brussels, which is the headquarters of the EU. And if you are a member of the EU, then you are not sovereign, because the policies that will apply to your nation and that will apply to your population, your public, will be decided outside of your country. They'll be decided in Brussels. So you don't have territorial sovereignty, you don't have legislative sovereignty either. And that's how you can mess up an entire nation's demographics. So that's what's being done. Backbencher Academy lover says, how geopolitically relevant is astrology, vastu, etc.? I have absolutely no idea. Sorry. Arun says, why are Iranian Shia Muslims who migrated to India in huge numbers equal to Pakistanis and Afghans not viewed as a concern despite strong religious, cultural and ideological ties to Iran, a key geopolitical player? Look, I don't talk about religious matters and all. I'm not sure about this. This is something I'm not aware of. Okay. This is something that I don't look into. Religious aspects and Hindu Muslim stuff and Shia versus Sunni and the difference between Shia people and Sunni people. and all that. I am not aware of this. Sorry, I won't be able to answer this question because I'm not aware of this. Sorry. Abhinav says, what power is behind mass immigration in Europe? The United States. As simple as that. Godliness says, reports mention French naval data, including their nuclear submarine details, have been leaked. Of course, to be leaked, they have to be hacked. Right. There are reports mentioning US and Israeli links to this leak. Are Indian Scorpion class submarine details also at risk, is the question. So, yes, today one woke up, one heard to the news that French naval data has been leaked, including details about their nuclear submarines. And there have been reports, I don't know, I've not seen the reports, but yeah, I mean, I'm hearing chatter, I'm hearing whispers that maybe the US and the Israelis are behind this. Do we know who's behind this? We don't know. But could the US and Israel be behind this possibly? Well, possibly. It's always a possibility. Maybe Russia is behind it, maybe China is behind it, maybe the US may be behind, maybe the Israelis may be behind it. But logically, who could it be is the question. Logically. Let's think about this logically. What happened recently between France and Israel? Well, recently, Monsieur Macron, the French president, he officially recognized the state of Palestine. He recognized Palestine as a nation. Is Palestine a nation? Is it? It's not a nation. Where is the nation of Palestine? Where does it exist? Is it Gaza? That little square piece of land? Is that the nation of Palestine? Is the West Bank of the River Jordan? Is that what is Palestine? Has something called Palestine existed historically? Has there ever been a kingdom or an empire or a nation called Palestine? Where does this name Palestine come from? It comes from the Philistine people who existed in the region of Israel about 2,500 years ago. What does that have to do with the Arabs who claim to be Palestinians? So the French have gone ahead and taken this step. They have recognized the state of Palestine. And obviously, Israel is super upset about that. I would not blame them for that. Right? Now, does this concern me? It doesn't concern me. It's something that's between the two nations, France and Israel. Okay? So that's their problem. That's their bilateral problem, let's say, from my perspective. And it doesn't have anything to do with us. But now, if France takes this kind of step, which is, you could say, a hostile and aggressive step towards Israel, then should Israel just sit back and take it? Given Israel's history, do you think they will not retaliate in some way? Historically, Israel has retaliated whenever somebody has taken hostile steps against them. So maybe, possibly, perhaps, Israel could potentially be behind this. But it's pure speculation. There is no evidence of that, right? So, yeah, possibly Israel could perhaps hypothetically be behind this. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm saying there's a possibility. Now, the Indian Scorpion class submarine. So, we have a bunch of Scorpion class submarines that we operate. These are a French design. These were built, I think, there are definitely at least a few of them were built in India. And the design is a French design, the Scorpion class. So, are our submarines also at risk because of the data that was leaked out? I am not sure, but possibly there could be some sensitive data that may have leaked out. If data corresponding to Scorpion class submarines as a class is leaked out, that will definitely apply to Indian Scorpion class submarines as well, even if they have been modified in some way and tailored specifically for India. But some of the specifications will remain the same. So I think there's a possibility that some data pertinent to Indian Scorpion class submarines may also have been leaked out as part of this wider leak of French naval data. So the Indian Navy, the Indian government need to look into it very, 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 very seriously and take whatever action needs to be taken ASAP, as soon as possible. All right. Okay. Dheeraj Kamath says, Israel is currently attacking Syria, apparently with the Druze genocide. Unlike India with respect to Bangladesh Hindus, yeah, we aren't doing a thing about the genocide of Bangladesh Hindus in Bangladesh. Yeah, this is despite them being geopolitical allies. Apparently, what are my thoughts? Okay, let's take a look at the map so that we can orient ourselves and locate the region we are talking about. So, if you look here, you will see that Israel and Syria are neighboring countries. Okay, here we have Israel and we have Jordan. And if you go to the northern part of Israel, you will see that it's got a border with Syria. The border obviously is all dashed up and all that. And Israel has been somewhat expanding its border eastwards to some extent, possibly. Okay, and for the longest time, we had the Assad regime in Syria, the government of Mr. Al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad, and a few months ago there was a coup, a regime change operation, successful regime change operation that happened, and Mr. Bashar al-Assad had to flee to Moscow, and a terrorist has come to power in Damascus. His name is Al-Julani or something. Al-Julani. His actual name is Al-Shara. Yeah, I don't get, these are all foreign names, so I'm not good at speaking these names. But yeah, let's call him Mr. Al-Julani. He is a former wanted terrorist. I think a $10 million bounty on his head. But now he's an ally of the West. And let's see what Mr. Trump has done recently. Okay. So, Trump, Jolani, Al-Shara. So there we have Trump posing with a terrorist. Trump Al-Shara. Shara. So we have Mr. Donald Trump, the president of the US, posing with a person who was until recently regarded as a terrorist by the United States. There we have it. So that means that this former terrorist is now a Western ally, a US ally, right? And if he's an ally of the US, well, it technically makes him an ally of Israel, because the US is Israel's number one ally. And that means that any American ally will automatically should be regarded as an Israeli ally. So you have Julani, who is in power in Damascus, and he's running the country. And Israel bombed Damascus just a few days ago. And Israel is conducting military operations in Syria. And the justification being given is that the Al-Shara al-Julani regime is conducting a genocide of the Druze people. So what's going on is the question. What exactly is going on? If this guy is your ally, if you have an allied government there, then let them do what they want. Why are you attacking them? So, and who are these Druze people? The Druze people are an Arabic people who practice an Abrahamic religion called the Druze religion. And it's not Islam, it's a different religion. And if you are a terrorist like Al-Shara, you will regard the Druze people as non-Muslims, and I suppose they're supposed to be killed, apparently, according to their ideology. I don't know. I don't get it. But that's how it works for them. So there's a genocide possibly going on of the Druze people. They are being attacked and they're being killed and all that. And Israel possibly is taking action because of that. Is that really why Israel is attacking Syria? Or does Israel have some other geopolitical agenda? So some people allege, some people claim that Israel wants to expand its territory and create a greater Israel. That's what some people claim. Is it true? Well, I don't know about that. Some people make that allegation, and some people put out a map of greater Israel, which kind of includes large areas of Syria. Is that the reason why Israel is doing this? I don't know. We'll have to wait and watch. Okay. So the official reason possibly is that this is being done to stop the genocide of the Druze people. And some people are alleging that Israel wants to expand its territory. We'll have to wait and watch and see what's really happening. Koshal Panchal, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Uh, Achintya Anand says, what are websites that one should use to research geopolitics and history, as many of the books are agenda driven? So, first of all, um, okay, we'll talk about geopolitics here. History, that's a whole different story. We are not discussing history today. Let's talk about geopolitics. What websites can you use to research geopolitics? And what books can you read to research? Okay, books, you're not asking about books. First of all, there are no books about geopolitics. Have you seen a textbook of geopolitics anywhere in the world? There's no textbook of geopolitics. Are there any courses in universities that teach you geopolitics? I don't think so. You generally are taught strategy, military history, military tactics and strategy. You taught history, but I have never seen any course in geopolitics. So there aren't really any books on geopolitics. If you want to read books on geopolitics, you have to read books that are related to military strategy, books that are related to diplomacy, books that are related to foreign policy. And using all this together, you kind of form an idea of what geopolitics is kind of like. But the best way to study geopolitics is to study a lot of history. And then you kind of start seeing the patterns and the cyclical nature of things. Now, what websites can you use to research geopolitics? I suppose you just read the news. Read the news and try and form patterns and connections. Because there's no geopolitics website. Is there a website called geopolitics.com or whatever? There are some think tanks, right? There are some think tanks that do exist that do discuss foreign policy matters. And then there are some publications like foreignpolicy.com or something. And so as far as India is concerned, I don't know of any major think tank or publication that deals with foreign policy issues and geopolitical issues. But from the US, there are many. There's the Atlantic, which used to be great in the past, not so great these days. There's the National Interest that talks about the American national interest in geopolitics from that perspective. There is Foreign Policy, I believe, that all of that is from the American perspective. There's ASPI. I forget, it's an Australian thing. That's a think tank that puts forth policy recommendations and deep dive analysis of various geopolitical things and all. There is that. And what else? Yeah, so you have to read all of this and keep track of what these people are recommending. Obviously, there's Rand Corporation, which is now turned into a US propaganda outlet, kind of. It used to be highly respectable in the past, but it has a dodgy history, which I'll not go into right now. So yeah, that's what you do, I suppose. That's what you do. Bharatiya says, Russia may foment problems for us internally or geopolitically more than US or China. If we were to develop Andaman crude reserves into a full ONG ecosystem, as they will lose significant revenue. No, they won't. They won't. See, first of all, if we do, let's say, discover significant reserves of crude oil in the Andamans. First of all, any such discovery hasn't been announced. We are drilling in the Andamans, and it's possible that we may find something. I've been saying this for a long time. If we start drilling everywhere, we'll find more oil and gas than in the Persian Gulf and Arabian Peninsula region. I'm sure we will. So I think it's a matter of time before we find some major crude oil discovery. If that happens, we become self-sufficient in energy. We potentially may become an exporter of energy. But to reach that state of becoming self-sufficient and then becoming an exporter will take at least 10 years. 5-10 years at least. Because you have to first discover the oil reserves. Then you have to go and create those oil rigs on top of that, which can be used to extract the oil. Then you have to develop the refineries, which can refine all of that crude oil into finished products. All of that process, all of that setting up of the infrastructure, all of that will take 5-10 years minimum, right? And so it won't happen overnight. That today India is purchasing tremendous amounts of Russian crude, and tomorrow morning we stop everything. Won't happen like that. It'll be a slow, gradual process. And if India becomes self-sufficient in energy, it's great for India. It's also great for Russia. Yeah, sure, they will lose out on some revenue, but it's not India's fault. And secondly, it will make India a much stronger nation compared to China, because China doesn't have self-sufficiency in terms of energy. But if India becomes self-sufficient in terms of energy, it gives India a significant energy advantage and overall geopolitical advantage over China, which is great for Russia. So Russia won't mind it. They won't foment any problems for us internally or geopolitically. They've never done that. So I don't foresee that this to be a problem at all. Rahul Lakshmanan says, is China likely to view us, India, as a rival against the West or a bulwark against the West in the near to mid-term? China will always see India as a rival. Okay? Even when there is maybe a rapprochement, maybe a détente, maybe a diplomatic thaw, whatever you want to call it, between India and China, China will always regard India as a rival. China may try and use India as a bulwark to some extent against the West. Perhaps they may try to use us in that manner. But note the word use. They will try to use us against somebody. They'll never try to help us. So, and I'm not sure if it's even a good idea for us to, allow China to export stuff to us in large quantities, because they have this overcapacity in manufacturing, and they need to export their stuff somewhere. Now it's no longer possible to export their finished products to the West anymore because of the trade war, the tariff war that's going on. So they would like to do that to India. But if they start dumping their products into India, it will kill Indian manufacturing. So I don't think it's a good idea. For us to go down that road. Then we will remain dependent on some foreign country or the other. For us, it's imperative to become completely self-sufficient in terms of manufacturing, in when it comes to technology. We cannot remain dependent on other countries. So China will always regard India as a rival. And China will have to be regarded as a rival by us always, no matter what is currently going on. Currently, they are being friendly to us, so what? We are natural adversaries and natural rivals as long as China occupies Tibet. The moment China withdraws from Tibet, we can be friends again. But as long as they are in occupation of Tibet, India and China are natural rivals. All right? ICMB says, subs or aircraft carriers, what's more important? Subs. Always subs. Aircraft carriers are good to have. When you are a $30 trillion economy, when you are the most powerful nation in the world and nobody dares to try and hit you, that's when you can use aircraft carriers to bully others, to display force, to as a show of force, as for the purpose of power projection. But you will see that aircraft carriers will not be used even by the US in contested waters. They'll stay away from contested waters. Have you seen aircraft carriers being deployed near Yemen by the Americans? They've stayed away from Yemen. Okay? Aircraft carriers cannot be used in contested waters, in contested airspace. Dangerous, super dangerous. Submarines, you can sneak a submarine into the enemy's harbor if you want. The submarine is the most dangerous asset a navy can have. Aircraft carriers are good to have. It's prestigious, and you can use that to bully the weak. But you can't use them in contested waters or contested airspace. Always submarines. And I hope the Indian Navy understands this. Karthik says, who will win the Muslim Caucasus, like Dagestan, Chechnya, Ingushetia, etc., Turkey, Iran, Russia, in terms of geopolitical dominance? Look, when it comes to Dagestan, Chechnya, Ingushetia, all of that, it all belongs to Russia. You think Turkey and Iran are in a position to win that from Russia? Absolutely not. Right? Let's go to the map. Let me show you. Okay. It's not a bad question, actually. Let's take a look at, because most people don't know about what is Ingushetia, what is Chechnya, what is Dagestan. So we're talking about the Caucasus region over here. See, you see this place, Makhachkala? That is Dagestan. It's the largest city, possibly the capital of the region of Dagestan. When it comes to Chechnya, the capital is Grozny. This here, that's Chechnya. These are Muslim regions. Okay, these people were converted to Islam in the past few centuries. Uh, which one was converted more recently, Chechnya or Dagestan? I don't remember. Ingushetia. Now let's look for Ingushetia. Ingushetia. Once again, is this little region over here. Pretty small region. And so that's what we're talking about. These are the so-called small republics of Chechnya, Dagestan, uh, Ingushetia, and so on. And all of this belongs to Russia. Turkey is in no position to take this from Russia, neither is Iran. And that, I suppose, is the answer. That's it. Right? So it belongs to Russia, and it's not contested at all in any manner. Right. Okay. What else do we have? We have here. Aishwari Nagarkar says, can India regain its power status? Given the fact that we are surrounded by hostile / failed nations. By the way, the UK lost that status just because its enemies were nearby. The UK lost its status because its enemies were nearby. Yeah? Which enemies were nearby? The UK lost its empire. Yeah, it did. The UK was the dominant superpower of the world until the 1930s or so. Maybe 1910s, 1920s. But its power started waning. Now, it lost its imperial status to somebody else. Who was that? It was the US. Is the US near the UK? The US is far, far from the UK. What other nations were nearby? Yeah, we had the Second World War, Germany, and historically France was the enemy was for 1,000 years an enemy of the UK. But that has nothing to do with the UK losing its dominant status. It has nothing to do with that. So I'm not sure what the parallels are over here. Can India regain its power status? Which status are you talking about? The past 1,000 years, roughly, various parts of India were under foreign occupation. Right? Of course, the whole of India wasn't under foreign occupation 1,000 years ago, but it started with the fall of Gandhar. So that's where the first encroachment happened. And then slowly the Turks made inroads into India, and you know what happened. So we started losing our territories more than 1,000 years ago, and our power was declining ever since. So what power status are you talking about? Are you talking about the Mauryan times when Ashok was in power, Emperor Ashok, one of our greatest emperors? Are you talking about the times of Kanishka? Are you talking about the Chola times? Are you talking about the Maratha times? I'm not sure what. We are a reasonably powerful nation, but obviously, if you're talking about power status, are you talking about India becoming the most powerful country in the world? We are a reasonably powerful nation, but we are not anywhere close to being the most powerful nation. Can we become the most powerful nation one day? It's possible. Anything is possible. But how do we do it is the question. You become powerful through technology. Today, we are trying to replicate technology other nations have developed 20, 30, 40 years ago. Right? Jet engines, for example. What else? Nuclear reactors. Fighter planes. What other nations did 20, 30, 40 years ago, we are trying to do it today. We're trying to play catch up. We're trying to develop LLMs, AI, that other nations have done. Now, the AI time frames are significantly compressed. So the way to become the most powerful nation is by developing the best technology in the world. Today, the differentiator when it comes to power is technology. Imagine tomorrow India develops the technology. Let me give you a completely fictional, hypothetical science fiction example. Let's say India develops anti-gravity technology tomorrow. That way, with the technology, we can lift any amount of matter into space in a matter of minutes. 1,000 tons to space into Earth orbit. Sure, let's do it. That would give India complete domination of the space domain, which would be a game changer. It would transform India into superpower overnight. Right? Technology is the differentiator. That's what we need to do. But for that, we need to reform our education system so that the Indian genius can be unleashed. Right? So a lot of reforms will have to be done. And if we do that, then yeah, we can certainly become the most powerful nation in the world. Napoleon Singh Shekhawat says, was Noshir Gawadia framed? Was China and the US involved in it? The guy who developed stealth technology, is that who you're referring to? Let me quickly Google him. Pretty obscure name, but there was a guy who developed stealth technology for the US. Noshir Gawadia. Exactly. This is the guy who was instrumental in developing stealth technology for the United States. He was born in Mumbai. He was Indian. He migrated to the US in 1963. And he was one of the principal designers of the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. He conceived and conceptually designed the B-2 bomber's entire propulsion system. This guy. Okay? And he was arrested for being a spy in 2005 and was convicted. I suppose he is in prison right now. He is currently incarcerated in some whatever prison in the US. 32 years in prison. So was he framed? I have no idea. I don't know. He was interviewed twice, blah blah blah, etc., etc., etc. Trial and so on. So allegedly he transferred some technology. He sold classified information to China and to individuals in Germany, Israel, and Switzerland. Is it true? Is it not true? Was he framed? I don't know. But yes, I remember that. Yeah. So the moment you said Noshir Gawadia, I was like, yeah, I think that's the case you're talking about. The guy who developed the B-2 stealth bomber, the propulsion system, stealth technology, because that is part of the stealth characteristics. So I don't know. I don't know if China, if he was framed or not. Maybe he was. I don't know. Anonymous scientist says, we know a lot about the deep state in the US and China. Which other nations have a strong deep state? How much power do they wield? Do we know that the Chinese have a deep state? When you talk about deep state, the only nation you're talking about is the US. You're not referring to China when you say deep state. What deep state do the Chinese have? They have the Chinese Communist Party. We know where the power lies. It lies in the Chinese Communist Party's Politburo and in the emperor, the Mr. Xi Jinping, and whoever will eventually replace Mr. Xi Jinping. So that's where the power lies. There's no hidden power in China, as far as we know. Nobody refers to some hidden power center in China. When you talk about the deep state, you're only referring to the US. You're not talking about the Chinese or any other European country or anything else. And listen, when you ask me about how much power does any other deep state yield, you asking me as if I am aware of, okay, this is the deep state, these are the members, and this is how much power they have and how much money they have. A deep state is supposed to be something completely hidden. How will I know about this? How will I know about this? I am very honored that you think that I may know about it, but I don't. Come on. I only know what's accessible in the public domain. And even if I were to know possibly about something, do you think I would be stupid enough to speak about this in public? If you know about it, you don't speak about it. You do not. What is the first rule of Fight Club? You do not speak about Fight Club. Okay. Rashid Uddin says, France recognized Palestine, but also support Israel rights. Thoughts? Yeah. I'm not sure what the French are up to, what Monsieur Macron is attempting to perform. What is he trying to do? It's signaling. It's virtue signaling. By recognizing a fictional country that doesn't exist, what are you trying to achieve? You're trying to signal something. You're trying to send a message to whoever. Some of it is virtue signaling. Some of that may stem from an antipathy, possibly between the two leaders. I'm not sure what it is. The France obviously also supports Israel's right to exist, of course, right, and for Israel's right to defend itself from terrorists. For any civilized nation has to support that, right? So yes, France. I'm not sure why they have taken the step of recognizing Palestine, and they seem to have got immediate blowback from somewhere with the leakage of all that classified naval information. Right? My thoughts. I mean, I'm not sure what they're trying to achieve by doing this. What's the point? It's a fictional nation. It doesn't exist. Darth Vader says, "Do you agree that the US is the biggest sponsor of terrorism?" Look, I'll tell you what. It is undeniable that the US funded and financed Pakistani terrorism against India for several decades. No question about that. Pakistan is the world's biggest state sponsor of terror, the biggest exporter of terrorism, the biggest creator and exporter of terrorism. That's Pakistan. And its primary patron was the US for several decades. Even today, the US is the overlord of Pakistan. So that's what I will tell you. That is undeniable. Even the Americans can't deny this. That they funded and financed Pakistani terrorism for decades. Beyond that, I'll not go into other matters. Backbencher Academy lover says, please tell your thoughts on Vastu. I don't know, sir, anything about Vastu. I don't know anything about astrology. I have never read a single page about Vastu or astrology, let alone a book. I have absolutely zero knowledge about Vastu, about astrology, and whatever else may be related to that. So I am sorry, I am not the right person to ask these questions. I'm going to talk about geopolitics today. Let us stick to geopolitics. Thank you. And sorry, I can't answer this question because I don't have any knowledge. Okay. Look, I am taking questions about geopolitics today. I have said that very clearly. That's what the audience is here to watch. I have announced 1 week ago that this super chat episode is a geopolitics episode. So all the viewers who are watching this right now and who will watch this after it is live, people will watch it later also. They will come because they will see the title Geopolitics. But if I start talking about Vastu, I start talking about astrology, I start talking about Satvahanas and history, then I'll be disappointing my audience, right? So please, I have said this very clearly. I will not take questions that are not related to geopolitics. I've even put a pinned comment, but still you are doing this. I'm happy to answer history questions in other live streams. But please respect, my dear friends, the fact that this is a geopolitics live stream. Okay? I will take this question in a future live stream, which will be open to other topics. I'll be happy to. Right now, I can't take this. Okay, Karan says, I have visited Iran. It's false that that Islam has faded from Iran. Shiraz, Tabriz, and Isfahan were packed with devout Shias during Muharram. I haven't seen such massive crowds before. Can Iran still be seen as a lasting Shia geopolitical force? Well, I haven't visited Iran, so I think you have better first-hand knowledge of Iran than me. Okay, I'll have to give that to you. And you went to Shiraz, Tabriz, Isfahan, and you saw large crowds like you have never seen before. Does that mean that the entirety of Iran is represented by what you saw in those 3-4 places? Doesn't mean that. Let's say let's see. Okay, let's quickly look into this. Let's do a Google search. Shiraz population 2025. What's the population? 1.7 million. Let's say you saw a crowd of 300,000, 3 lakh people. That's a gigantic, ginormous crowd. Maybe you saw a crowd of 500,000. half a million. I mean, I can't imagine a crowd of 500,000. So even that is less than one third of the population of Shiraz. What about Tabriz? Tabriz population, it is 1.7 million. Let's say you saw a crowd of 300,000. How it's about one sixth of the population of Tabriz. What's Isfahan? Isfahan, 2.33 million. So these are enormous populations, each of these cities, and you saw pretty large crowds. Does it mean that everybody in that city is just as devout? Let's say I have a city of 1 million people, and 200,000 of those, or let's say 500,000 of those, are devout Shia Muslims. And when there is a Muharram, whatever, they will come out in a big procession, and maybe 3 lakh come out. That's a huge crowd. But still, it means that half the city may not be that devout, right? So I know you experience something incredible, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the whole of Islam, the whole of Iran is super Islamic and all that. Okay? Please don't allow your personal experiences to cloud your judgment. I understand the fact that you have been there, I haven't been there. So you have better first-hand knowledge. But sometimes your first-hand knowledge will cloud your perception of what statistics may represent. So I'm hearing anecdotal evidence, okay, that Islam is possibly fading from Iran. That maybe half of the Iranian population no longer actively practices Islam. That's what I hear. Now, even that is hearsay. So even that may not be true, right? So I think the truth may lie somewhere in between. But so that's what I can say. So my point is, don't let your personal experiences cloud your judgment. Right. What do we have? What else do we have? One second. Let me find the next question. Abhinav says, thoughts on US Golden Dome. Will it enable the US to launch nuclear strikes without worrying about retaliatory nuclear strikes by China or Russia? No. No matter how good your missile defense system is, it is not foolproof. It is not guaranteed to be 100% effective. Okay? The US Golden Dome, what is it like? Let's Google it. US Golden Dome. Dome. It's a proposed missile defense system. Layered defense system, global constellation of satellites, sensors, space-based. Oh my God, they're going to militarize space. Very good. Then don't blame others then later. Detect and destroy incoming missiles, including balance. So it reminds me of something that was very, very hyped up in the 1980s when I was a little kid. There was Star Wars. Reagan Star Wars. 1 second. Yeah, Reagan Star Wars. Strategic Defense Initiative, derisively nicknamed the Star Wars program. And I remember these graphics they had put out. So I'm not saying that because Star Wars did not work and all, it means that Golden Dome won't work. But this is a proposed missile defense system. I don't know how long it will take. And no matter how good your missile defense system is, it is not guaranteed it's not guaranteed to destroy all incoming bogeys. Right? And it's going to be a multi-layered defense system. So some of the interception will be done by space-based assets like satellites. So they are militarizing space. Then they can't blame other countries for militarizing space in return. So some of the interceptions may be done in space by space-based assets. Some of them may be done by ground-based assets, like missiles that you launch from the ground. There may be laser systems in there. So it's a multi-layered defense system, which makes sense. But even then, it's not necessary that it will intercept everything. So it will definitely give the US possibly much better defense against incoming missiles than they have right now. But it will not guarantee 100% interception rate. And obviously, when you design and implement a multi-layered defense system like this, your adversaries will go hard at will be hard at work immediately to design systems that will bypass that. It's always a cat and mouse game. I'm developing a better defense system, so my adversaries will come to know about that, and they will start developing better missile systems that will bypass my defenses. Then I understand what missiles they're developing, so I'll try and augment my defense system, and they will come to hear about it, so they will start augmenting their offensive systems as well. So it's a cat and mouse game. It doesn't guarantee anything for anybody. Okay, Ankita says there's an ongoing mass killing and brutal slaughtering of Druze people who are minorities in Syria, and the West is comfortably silent. Is this so? Is this the kind of regime change the West was advocating for so many years? What's my opinion? Well, that's what the West does. This is the standard, time-tested, time-honored modus operandi of the West. Do you know what happened in Indonesia in the 1950s? Let's Google this. I mean, there's a humanitarian disaster happening right now in East Africa. No one knows about this. No one hears about this. But let's talk about Indonesia regime change. Suharto Sukarno, Indonesia, mid 60s. So there was a transition from Sukarno's old order to Suharto's new order, and it led to Suharto's rise to power and Sukarno's removal, authoritarian rule, suppression of dissent, transition to the new order. And what happened as a consequence of this? United States assistance to Suharto. Oh, very nice. That's very good. Indonesian mass killings of foreign involvement. Where is that? CIA activities. Very nice. Very nice. Indonesian mass killings of 1965-66. How many died? About between 500,000 to 1 million. Okay, official figures. You have no idea of the horrors that were unleashed in Indonesia as a consequence of this US mediated regime change operation. Horrific. And now today they make movies about this in the US. What was it called, that movie? I would not recommend anybody to watch that movie, by the way. And it's a good thing I don't remember the name right now. So when the US does a regime change operation, it's natural for all kinds of barbaric things to happen. Absolutely natural. You have to understand it's a given. I mean, when there was the liberation of Libya from Muammar Gaddafi was deposed and brutally murdered, right, by the Americans. Then what happened? Was there a transition to democracy and freedom and human rights in Libya? No. Libya became an open slave market. What's the condition of Libya today? It's a hellhole. Who did that? The United States. When the US liberated Iraq from Shri Saddam Hussein, what happened? Did you get freedom and human rights and democracy in Iraq? Yeah, today apparently you have elections in Iraq. Oh, great. What else happened? Iraq became a hellhole. So now you have Syria. They've been trying to depose Bashar al-Assad since 2009, 2010, thereabouts, right? That's when the whole so-called civil war started. When the Americans started employing first Al-Qaeda as an American proxy, and then ISIS emerged out of nowhere. Again, another US proxy, and so on. So now that Al-Julani or Al-Shara, whatever his name is, has taken over, a former terrorist, well, now what do you expect? He's gonna carry out whatever he wants to carry out. So yeah, the Druze people are being, first it was the Yazidis. So when ISIS was slaughtering, enslaving, and whatever else they were doing to the Yazidis, yeah, I mean, unspeakable atrocities and horrors. What was the US doing? Don't they believe in human rights and freedom and democracy? What did they do? about the poor Yazidi people. I hear, I read somewhere yesterday or day before yesterday, a Yazidi woman was recently freed from 12 years of captivity, ISIS captivity, just like last week. Imagine what she went through. So this is all the consequence of the American intervention, wherever they intervene. So yeah, and what happens is that when a US ally will perpetrate all kinds of atrocities on helpless people, the Western media will stay quiet about this, so no one comes to know, right? Absolute barbarity, absolute hypocrisy. That's the kind of regime change the West has been advocating for. Whenever the West does regime change, they give freedom to their new asset, the new puppet dictator, to do whatever he wants. It's a reward, and what they expect in exchange is that he will do whatever the West tells him to do. He will not stray from his path. As long as he will obey the orders of the West, he's allowed to do whatever he wants. That's how it goes, and that's what we are seeing in Syria. Pratham Soni says, how to raise standard of questions for you, guide us. I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. Ask whatever comes to your mind, and I'll try and answer. Okay, Lakshman Srinivasan says, what with major advances in drones, robotics, military technology, Turkey is expanding its influence across the Middle East and Europe. Could this mark the beginning of a neo-Ottoman geopolitical revival in the region? So Turkey is this strange nation. Strange. Why do I say strange nation? On the one hand, it has imperial ambitions. On the other hand, it is not fully sovereign. It's a member of NATO. Let's see this. Okay, let's Google this. See, how many US nuclear weapons in Turkey? There are an estimated 20 US nuclear weapons, B-61 gravity bombs, stored at Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. These weapons are part of a larger stockpile of US nuclear weapons deployed in blah, 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 all that. They're stored in hardened bunkers and protected by electronic systems and US troops. How many US military bases? Bases in Turkey. There are at least 2 known US military installations in Turkey: Incirlik Air Base and Izmir Air Station. Further, there is the Küçernik radar station and an Ankara support facility. And Incirlik, obviously, you have US nuclear weapons there, and so on and so forth. So Turkey is a nation that is not territorially or militarily sovereign, because it has US military bases on its soil, which automatically makes it a non-sovereign nation. And if it's a part of NATO, it means that its armed forces can come under the control of a foreign citizen. At least some part of its armed forces will have to be commanded by a foreign citizen, which means it's not fully militarily sovereign either. So you have that. Okay, you have that. Turkey is not fully sovereign, but it has imperial ambitions. So if you look at the geographical location of Turkey, Turkey, you could say, has a God-gifted geographical location. It controls 2 of the most vital choke points in the Mediterranean region. First of all, the Strait of the Dardanelles over here. Yeah, this one. Then you have the Sea of Marmara, and then you have the Bosphorus Strait. 2 extremely vital geopolitical choke points. And Turkey sits on top of these 2 choke points. And by doing so, it has been rent-seeking for the past 70, 80 years. And that's why it's so important for NATO. So Turkey is not fully sovereign. It's a very important strategic location, and it has imperial ambitions, and it is doing well when it comes to technology. Yeah, they are developing drones. They're developing fighter planes. The Khan, the 5th generation Khan fighter plane, which is still, I think, as far as I know, it's still a prototype. I'm not even sure if the prototype has flown, but whatever. Drones, they have good drones apparently. Well, the Pakistanis use Turkish drones, and we know what happened to those drones. But maybe those are export versions, and maybe the Turkish drones are good. Possibly. We have to uh, keep that in mind and allow for that possibility. And Turkey is expanding its influence across the Middle East and Europe with US permission, of course. Not really Europe that much, but Central Asia. They're trying to wipe Armenia out of the map of the world. And they want to create a pan-Turan corridor that connects Turkey all the way to the various Turkic nations, Central Asian nations. So all of this that taken together, military technology, drones, robotics, geopolitical ambitions, all of that, does it mean that there could be the beginning of a neo-Ottoman geopolitical revival in the region? Only if the US allows it. Only if the US allows it. Only if it aligns with US geopolitical objectives. Otherwise, there'll be no neo-Ottoman geopolitical revival. And even if there's a Turkish geopolitical revival, it will not be allowed to take neo-Ottoman dimensions or neo-Ottoman flavor. Yeah, the Ottoman flavor will remain symbolic at best, because otherwise that's a problem for the US. So yeah, it's complicated, but Turkey is a US asset. It also is dallying with Russia. It is doing things that the US doesn't like. For example, the purchase of the S-400 system, which displeased the US, and which is why Turkey was not allowed to remain part of the F-35 program, which I think is a good thing for Turkey, actually, because the F-35 is a flying trash can, and so on. Yeah. MK says, how did Israel acquire nukes? Well, there are various stories. How did the world come to know that the Israelis have nukes? There was an Israeli traitor. The Israelis considered him to be a traitor. His name was Mordechai Vanunu. And he later changed his name to David Crossman or something. He converted to Christianity. And he was in prison because of what he did and so on. The Israelis were able to abduct him from Europe and bring him back to Israel and imprison him. And he's right now in Israel. So that's how the world came to know about the Israeli nuclear program. And there was an Israeli collaboration with South Africa, I believe. It was with South Africa. And somewhere in the 1960s or 70s, there was this bunch of US satellites called the Vela satellites that caught an incident in the southern Atlantic Ocean, a double flash incident, the Vela incident. Those satellites, actually, physics story here, these satellites were put in orbit to catch such incidents, double flash. So whenever you have an atmospheric nuclear explosion, that is a double flash event. There's an initial very rapid flash, and then there's a slower build up, which is the second flash. So a nuclear explosion, atmospheric explosion, has two flashes. It's a double flash incident. So the Vela satellites were put in orbit to detect atmospheric nuclear tests. Whoever would do it would try to hide. But these satellites ended up finding all these weird flashes across the cosmos. And these turned out to be a new phenomenon called gamma ray bursts. And that's still kind of a mystery to some extent in physics today, in astrophysics. But coming back to this, there was a Vela incident in which these satellites caught what looked like a nuclear test in the southern Atlantic Ocean. Vela incident. 1979, yes. An unidentified double flash of light detected by an American Vela satellite. And it was most likely an atomic test done jointly by Israel and South Africa, carried out jointly by South Africa and Israel. Now, that's an interesting story I can give you. How did Israel acquire nukes? Who was it? France that transferred technology? Was it the US that transferred technology? I'm not very clear about that, but I suppose you can look it up. Okay. Godliness says we have at least 7 crore illegal aliens. Our geographical. Yeah, I agree with you, but this is not a geopolitical question right now. Of course, this is a question of internal security, but I will not take this today because we're discussing geopolitics today. Yeah, I agree. This catastrophe has to stop, and I agree with you. But beyond that, I'll not say anything right now. Amisha says, is Trump making America alone again? making America alone again. What's my take? Well, America doesn't have a lot of friends right now, right? Uh, Whichever nations were positively, warmly inclined towards the US, they have all been alienated by Trump's actions, haven't they? Trump has been imposing these tariffs, pretty aggressive tariffs on US allies. These are arm twisting tactics, these are bullying tactics. 50% tariffs on Brazil. I mean, what the hell? This is a US asset, it's a US vassal, it's a US ally. The EU is a US asset, a US vassal. And when you start treating your allies like this, it whatever whatever warmth those nations had towards you will evaporate. So they will comply with your demands because they are afraid of you, because you're more powerful, but you will see all kinds of passive aggressive behavior after that. So wherever possible, they will not cooperate with you. So yeah, Trump is. I mean, recently you had the leader of Singapore saying that the world needs you need a world minus one, which is one world minus America kind of trading order, right? Financial order. So everyone is fed up with what Trump is doing. The Americans, they don't have a lot of friends right now because of the actions they're taking. So yeah, Trump is indeed making America alone. They are the most powerful nation. They have global power projection capabilities. They have military bases across the world, which is why the world has to do what they say. But nobody will cooperate beyond what's required with the US. And yeah, that does indeed make America kind of alone in the world right now. So that's what Trump is doing. He's not doing his nation a favor. He's destroying the global order his nation created over the past 70, 80 years. He's destroying it single-handedly. Maybe that's why he has been made president. Maybe that's why the deep state made Trump president, because they want the world order to be upended and a new order to be created. Maybe that's his task. So he's doing a good job of carrying out the orders of the deep state. But yeah, it's not doing his nation any favors. It's making his nation alone. So Trump is indeed making America alone again, like you say. Nilay says, in the 9/11 attacks, terrorists were mostly Saudi Arabians. Still, the US maintained friendly relations with Saudi Arabia. Why is that? Like oil can be acquired by other Gulf nations. So this is a mystery. I don't know the answer. Yeah, I don't know. Saudi Arabia is indeed a US protectorate, US vassal, US ally, whatever you want to say. And yeah, you see, there was a previous bombing of the World Trade Center. The first bombing happened in 1990 something. It was carried out by Ramzi Yusuf or something. Let's Google that. So that guy was a Pakistani. Okay, Ramzi Yusuf, a Pakistani convicted terrorist who was one of the main perpetrators. The 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Is he alive? He's alive. Yeah, he's just 57 years old. So this guy was a Pakistani. He carried out the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, the bombing of a Philippine Airlines flight. He was a co-conspirator in some other Bojinka plot, and so on and so forth. He was trying to set a bomb in a doll. Well, that's how nice that is. And he was extradited to the US. So this is a Pakistani terrorist who conducted a terrorist attack on the US. Well, why did the US still maintain relations with Pakistan? Friendly relations. Because Pakistan is useful for the US. And because the Pakistani government cooperated with the US and extradited this terrorist to the US. Similarly, when the 9/11 attacks happened and it emerged that many of these terrorists were from Saudi Arabia, I suppose the government of Saudi Arabia must have cooperated fully with the US. So this was not a government-sponsored thing. It was just a few citizens who did that. So and Saudi Arabia is still very useful to the US, and why would they give that up? So that's why. Anonymous scientist says, how actively does Vatican City interfere in the geopolitics of Christian countries? I'm not really sure about that. The Vatican. See, the Vatican, if the Vatican is geopolitically powerful, it may be part of the deep state that controls the US. But beyond that, I don't really know about that. Um, the Vatican historically was very powerful. It was the most powerful entity in Europe. It decided the fates of kingdoms and empires. It decided who a king could marry or divorce. And it could decide not to grant a divorce to a king even if he wanted. It had so much power, right? So historically, it was super powerful. Today, I'm sure it's not entirely lost its power, but whatever power it may have may be hidden below the surface. So yeah, this is kind of a mystery, and I'm not really sure how actively and to what extent it interferes in the geopolitics of Christian countries. I'm not really sure. But yeah, it does interfere in the internal affairs of India, for example. Because in India, if you are some Christian priests, what are the higher ranked Christian priests called? Those padris, bishops, cardinals. I think those are appointed by the Vatican, and they have actual power over their parishes and whatnot in India, over the population, which, in my opinion, is interference in the internal affairs of India. The Chinese don't allow this, but we do. So yeah, they do have some power actually. Okay, VS says, if Boeing is facing so many quality issues, what possible alternate steps would the US take to alter the NGAD F-47 program? Also, could you name a few books available on the military industrial complex? What's NGAD 47? Let's see. NGAD 47. NGAD 47. The F-47, a sixth generation fighter plane being developed under the US Air Force's next generation air dominance program. It's envisioned as a blah, 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 blah. Significant undertaking. 20 billion initial contract has been awarded to Boeing, and future costs will reach into the hundreds of billions. Look, when Boeing develops a fighter jet for the United States, it's done in a completely different facility compared to where they're manufacturing the civilian aircraft. And I assure you, when Boeing is manufacturing, designing, developing, and eventually manufacturing the F-47 or any military fighter plane, the safety standards, quality standards will be totally different from what they employ in the civilian program. Okay, when they are manufacturing Boeing 737s or whatever it is that they manufacture, that's a different story. So it won't be the same factory, it won't be the same operation, it will be a totally different thing, a totally different set of engineers. So I assure you, there'll be no issues, no quality issues when it comes to the fighter planes. Books available on military industrial complex. I haven't read any books on the military industrial complex. I don't know. Okay. Geopolitical Dubey says, Turkish, will you please marry me? I am Muslim like you. We are one Ummah. Our ancestors are the same. I love you, Bangladesh, next superpower. I have absolutely no idea what you're saying, but all right. This is a geopolitics live stream, sir. We'll talk about geopolitics here. Khan Yunus says, even if India reaches $10 to $15 trillion economy, and if resource inequality persists and per capita income stays near 3,000, wouldn't it be pointless? Even Nigeria may reach 6 to 7 trillion. What makes such growth meaningful then? See, right now India is a 4.5 trillion. Let's see this, okay? Let's Google this quickly. What's India's current GDP? India GDP in trillion USD. How many trillion? Okay, it's $4.2 trillion USD. It's 4.2 trillion USD right now, okay? And GDP per capita. GDP per capita is 2,700 USD right now, more or less. So our GDP is 4.2 trillion and GDP per capita is 2.7 10,000. So if we if we double our GDP with the same population, our GDP per capita will become 5.4 thousand. It won't remain near 3,000. Okay, if the GDP triples to 12.6, then the GDP per capita will become 2.7 times 3, 21, 8.1. So it won't remain near 3,000. Please, this is just basic mathematics. So with a $15 trillion economy, our GDP per capita will be closer to 10,000. It will be above 9,000. It will be nowhere near 3,000. How is it pointless? How is it pointless? Your population is not going to go beyond 1.4 billion, right? Our population is now slowly going to start declining. So if we reach a $15 trillion economy, our GDP per capita will be very close to 10,000, not 3,000. Please get the math right, sir. So how is it pointless? It's very pointful, actually. It'll be great. Your living standards will increase significantly. Quality of life will increase significantly. And resource inequality. I don't think there is resource in India is one of the least unequal countries in the world. Recently, the World Bank report came out. India is one of the least unequal countries in the world. And show me any country that has complete equality. Equality is unnatural. Please understand that. You've been fed this propaganda that everybody has to be equal. How can everybody be equal? Is everybody the same? Does everybody have the same skills, same talent, same IQ, same everything? No. You can't have equality. You can give everybody equal rights, but you can't have equal outcomes. Some people are just naturally better, more intelligent, more hardworking, more consistent, more disciplined. They will perform far better than somebody who is lazy. So how can you have equality? So there's never going to be equality. And it is undesirable if you impose complete equality in a country, no matter how intelligent, how hardworking or lazy a person is, then it disincentivizes people from working hard. So we don't want equality. We want equality of rights, not equality of outcomes. And India is one of the least unequal countries in the world. So please don't be brainwashed by whatever. Let's find that World Bank report about equality, right? Shall we? India inequality, World Bank. Look at this. According to the World Bank, India ranks 4th globally in income equality. Gini index of 25.5, indicating a significantly low level of inequality. Okay? I don't know what propaganda you have been fed, my dear viewers, many of you. India is among the top 4 most equal countries globally. Please get that. There's a tremendous amount of negative propaganda about India. But the World Bank itself has put out this data, which shows that India is among the top 4 most equal nations. Now, what more do you want? So first of all, there is this myth of income, of resource and whatever inequality is an absolute myth. It's a lie. It's propaganda. Secondly, when we reach a $15 trillion economy, our GDP per capita will be around $10,000, not $3,000. Okay? So please, get your facts right, gentlemen. Okay. MK says, why is Russia not focusing on cutting edge technology like AI chip fabrication, quantum computing, etc.? The Russians do have a semiconductor program. I'm not sure to what extent it has succeeded or not. I think they are working on it. AI, I think Russia, I'm not sure what Russia is doing about AI. One doesn't hear of any major Russian LLMs. And if they are indeed developing AI systems, maybe they're doing it in secret, or maybe they're not doing it at all. But if they don't do it, they obviously will be left behind, which will be a tremendous problem for Russia. So I'm not sure what the deal is. Quantum computing, once again, I'm not sure. So if they are pursuing these technologies, development of these technologies, it's probably being done in secret. And if it's not being done in secret, and if it's not being done at all, then Russia risks being completely left behind, even behind countries like India. Because India is now taking things seriously. India is taking quantum computing seriously, definitely, in the past year or so. AI, we are now waking up to AI. And the chip fabrication, absolutely, we're taking it extremely seriously. If Russia is not doing it, then it risks being very quickly left behind. And right now, there's nothing in the public domain about what Russia is doing. So yeah, it's kind of unknown what Russia is doing about this. Okay, Devnur Singh says India is not a hegemonic state. But if we grow to $10 trillion, countries that don't play by the rules, like China, will defeat us again. Or should we not play by the rules to win? Okay, yeah, we are not a hegemonic state. We have historically never been a hegemonic state. No matter how powerful our emperors have been, they've never really sought to play the hegemonic game and colonize other countries and cultures and all that. It's never been the case. It's not part of our culture. So you are absolutely right. Now, today we are in the 21st century, and we know what the rules of the game are, right? So if we let's say become a 10-15 trillion dollar economy, but we still play the same old defensive game and don't play the hegemonic game, then nations that do play the hegemonic game will have an advantage over us, right? So the point is this: who makes the rules? The strong make the rules, and the weak must suffer by the rules that the strong make. So the rules can be changed at will. If you are strong, you can make your own rules. So until recently, India could not even imagine walking away unilaterally from something like the Indus Waters Treaty. But today we have done that vis-a-vis Pakistan. A few years ago, China walked away unilaterally from its agreement, from its treaty with the UK about Hong Kong. One nation, two systems. China said no more. We no longer recognize this treaty. China is way more powerful. And that's why they were able to do that. The US can unilaterally walk away at will from any treaty. Example, JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which Trump walked away from, this treaty that was signed between the US and Iran. Trump just walked away from it. So the more powerful you become, the more you can bend the rules or create new rules. So I suspect that as India gets more powerful, India will also play the same game. And if we don't do that, well, then somebody else will make the rules that we have to play by. So it's not like we should not play by the rules. It's more like we should define the rules that we play by. And I think we are definitely showing indications of doing that. I mean, walking away from the Indus Waters Treaty is exactly that we are no longer going to play by that old rule book. We're going to make new rules now, and we will play by those rules. So we are doing that, and that's a great indication. That's a great sign that India is no longer that idealistic nation that historically we have been. We will play by the old rules. We will not fight at night, but the enemies will fight at night, right? Prithviraj Chauhan. Unfortunately, Prithviraj Chauhan, he was a great man, great king, but he lost. And if you lose, you're going to be the butt of ridicule, no matter how great you were. But if you make one mistake and you lose, then you're going to be the butt of ridicule for the rest of history, unfortunately. So he's in that unfortunate position. Anyhow, Devnur Singh says, is America too big to fail? Nobody is too big to fail. I mean, imagine the Roman Empire at its peak. It was too big to fail, wasn't it? And yet it failed spectacularly in a very short time. Relatively short time, just a couple of centuries, right? I mean, something that happened in 10 AD ended up slowly but steadily triggering the decline of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire actually grew to its might after what happened in 10 AD. What is it called? The Battle of Teutoburg Forest. But anyhow, so no empire is too big to fail. And it's just a historical certainty that empires come into existence, they rise, they grow to their pinnacle, and then something happens and they fall. It's just a historical certainty. Every empire fails eventually. So America is not too big to fail. I think the bigger you are, the more likely you are to fail because you become complacent, So yeah, that's the deal. All right, my friends, I am done with geopolitical Dubai. Says the USSR failed. Another example. There you have it. Nobody imagined the USSR would fail, but there we have it. The USSR also failed. Okay, so we are at the end of today's live stream. Thank you so much for all the questions. It was great fun taking the questions, answering them all. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you in next week's live streams. So thank you very much. Take care. Keep asking questions. Keep raising your standards. Keep learning. And I will see you next week. Thank you very much. Take care.